I live in Norfolk, Virginia, and I'm here today as the unofficial representative of the city of Norfolk. And I hereby state in the strongest terms my opposition to lifting the uranium mining ban in Virginia. One of the principal reasons is the threat of contamination to Lake Gaston from the radioactive uranium waste containing 85% or retain 85% of the original radioactivity during a major participation event, such as extreme natural occurrences, hurricanes, earthquakes, intense rainfall, and drought. Lake Gaston is the primary drinking water source for about 1 million people in our area. Uranium levels in drinking water present a direct threat to public health. Damage to kidney function that may increase kidney disease. Also, peer-reviewed research and government reports confirm that persons living near uranium mines or mills may be exposed to higher levels of uranium in drinking water and in locally grown foods due to contaminated water and air, soil, water, and air. The potential health impacts of exposure to uranium and mining chemicals are well documented in global studies of people working in and living near mines and include lung cancer, bone cancer, leukemia, birth defect, weakened immune system, hormone disruption, and damage to DNA, kidney, and liver. The Baker report to the City of Virginia Beach concluded that a catastrophic failure of a mill-tainted containment at the Coles Hill site would significantly affect water supply for the Hampton Roads area. Released or leak-tainted would move through the river system, to the reservoirs downstream, including Lake Gaston, and may lead to radioactive concentrations in the river reservoir system at 10 to 20 times greater than the allowable limits under the Water Drinking Act. Therefore, in summary, I oppose lifting the ban. Keep lifting the ban far outweigh the benefits. And Virginia has a historic record of a lax and weak regulatory track record and structure that caters to and promotes the profits of private businesses over
and Superfund sites. This is not an issue of how we should mine, what the regulations should be, because the real issue is, does Virginia want to become a radioactive waste dump? And the answer is no. And also, you spoke earlier about being able to test for radiation in water, if that's possible. I would like to know what the status is of the radioactive tritium leaks that have been reported this past year at North Anna and Surrey. I'm in favor of keeping the ban, and it should be that way. Thank you.
All right, good evening. My name is Nathan Lott. I'm Executive Director of Virginia Conservation Network. I'm happy to say I've attended 5 of your 6 meetings to date, so I'm going to begin by thanking you for conducting yourselves with professionalism and with patience at each of these meetings. And in a show of appreciation for your public service, I brought you a present. These are the names of 16,000 Virginians who have signed a petition in support of the moratorium on uranium mining. They did so in church basements and in living rooms and at county fairs and farmers markets, and they did so online at keeptheban.org. I would ask that you register the breadth of their numbers and their sentiment in your report to Governor McDonald and also in your report to the Coal and Energy Commission so that they have an understanding of the scope of concern surrounding this issue. And I would also ask that you include in your final reports enumeration of the more than 40 cities and counties that have passed resolutions of support for the moratorium on uranium mining and milling in Virginia. So, thank you again for your hard work, and I offer my assistance to you in approving those resolutions or the names of this petition for your report. Thanks.
I actually have questions for the audience as well as the panel. How many people are here supporting uranium?
Oh, there were no questions.
About a dozen? Good. I would like to ask of these people, and I know this might be something maybe too regular to be tolerated, how many of these people made uranium a hobby before they got into this business? Okay, we had one more. I'd like to suggest to you that most of the people here pushing uranium, it's a job. I wish I had gotten to this gentleman with the windmills. Because when you put energy behind something, that happens. Uranium has spent a lot of money in this state in the last couple of years. Trying to build this ban, there are billions of dollars at stake. I understand that. But is it good policy? We're talking about having a containment system with $100,000. This uranium will stay active for 100,000 years. You talked about being able to measure it, not radiation. No money for radiation, just money to monitor. That's half of a plan. Less than half of a plan. I think we really deserve more than that. And Lord knows, the last legislative session made me wonder if we could expect anything. But I'm really hoping we can apply science. We shouldn't let politics do it and run around science. There's a reality we have to deal with. These neutrons, these atoms are going to break apart. No matter what you say, how many votes you get, we have to plan for the realities of the future. And Virginia deserves to have a good environment. And the buck stops with us. You can get it approved, but I personally hope that the people downstream who have to drink this water are going to put such a fight that it will never go through. Because it's just bad policy. 100,000-year stakes with a 30-year plan. It doesn't match. It doesn't match. We need our public service to be servants of us, the public. Not the industries, not the competing things of the moment, not the lobbyists, but us.
I'm from Richmond. I am not coming as a part of any group. I'm coming because this is an important issue. And I'm speaking in the perspective of 100,000 years. And I want to start with an Amish proverb that says, we did not inherit this land from our fathers. We borrow it from our children. So, do you want to pass to our children and our children's children for hundreds of generations tainted land, toxic water, hazardous waste that will last far more years than man has walked on 2 feet? Waste at the mining site, waste at the point of use, and spent waste with no sure place for storage and no secure storage that can last for millennia. It is wiser to act. Is it wiser to act for the long term than for today's profits, today's promise of jobs, and today's consumption of the irreplaceable? And I also want to thank you. So I'm speaking to keep the ban. I'm speaking for the ban. And I also want to thank you for this democratic opportunity to participate. And thank all of you for your service.
Larry Russell, I'm a member, citizen here of the capital of Asthma. And I've been involved with fighting various environmental issues, including nuclear, since my son was small enough to ride on my shoulder, and he's 31 now. But I thought this nightmarish proposition would have gone away by now. That's why I haven't been to the other hearings. We're looking at catastrophic changes in climate. We're looking at a major earthquake center 100 miles north of here, not even that far away, north of the center we're talking about. We're looking at massive flooding, huge tornadoes, hurricanes, and now we're talking about mining nuclear. That doesn't make any sense to me. We can't even handle the problems we know how to deal with, such as cleaning up the bay. We've been working on that for how long? 30 years, and it's still marginal? Come on. Rest my case.
Thank you. I'm Ray Gansner, and I volunteer with the Virginia Energy Independence Alliance. One of our goals is to support the development of domestic energy sources. The Coles Hill uranium site is the largest single new project for energy in the state of Virginia for the next few decades until we deal with the issues of offshore wind and oil and gas. So for the next 20 or 30 years, this is going to be the largest impact of increasing the supply of energy production in Virginia. The real question in my mind boils down to, can we responsibly develop this resource, and is our state regulatory body capable and competent to regulate it in the public interest? The answer to both these questions, I think, is yes. My experience as 40 years in the nuclear industry, I've seen the regulatory process work at different plants, different sites, and in different communities. The regulatory process and the heritage and the culture that's developed in the United States nuclear industry can safely develop and regulate these types of facilities. Now, the people that have asked questions tonight and are going to be making statements in a few minutes certainly are asking important questions. These questions need to be answered. But the way to effectively answer those questions is to let the regulatory process proceed by writing the regulations and enforcing those regulations so that, in fact, we know the answers to those questions. And that presumes that the regulatory process starts with the lifting of the ban so that the regulatory process can continue. Now, the overall public confidence has to be retained throughout the process. What you're going through here is part of that, and I encourage you to make sure that the public participation continues even during the operation, monitoring, and the reclamation of the potential sites in Virginia. Thank you.
I'm Scott Price. I am the Policy Director for the Alliance for Progressive Values. We are a multi-issue nonprofit based here in Richmond, Virginia. APV opposes lifting the ban on uranium mining in Virginia. Last year's report from the National Academy of Sciences warned of serious barriers to safely mining uranium in Virginia, and we asked if you would heed those warnings. Virginia is a unique environment for uranium mining. It is wet, prone to extreme weather, and is heavily populated. Nowhere else in the world do we mine uranium where this combination exists. As global climate change escalates and our population grows, these issues will only be exacerbated. We should not turn the Commonwealth of Virginia into an experiment or a cautionary tale. The continued interest in mining uranium in Virginia is focused on an incredibly short-sighted, profit-driven outlook that will benefit a few shareholders and executives, while at the same time putting many Virginians, including generations yet unborn, at needless risk. The process will leave a waste product that will have to be contained and dealt with for centuries. It will have adverse effects on the surrounding area, the local farming industry, and tourism long after the deposits are played out and the mines are closed. Radiation from the tailings will almost assuredly make its way into the water table in the region and could adversely impact other parts of the state, such as the Tidewater area. Virginia does not now have the regulatory infrastructure to properly deal with uranium mining in the state. Only around 1% of the general fund goes to environmental programs, and those numbers are under constant assault. We would ask that you keep the ban on the
Circle in Virginia. In this process, I guess I have a concern. The concern I have is whether the facts actually matter. There's been a lot of information provided by the City of Virginia Beach, other jurisdictions, National Academy of Sciences, and still I wonder why we're here. Actually, I'm concerned that the career agency folks here are able to do their job and render in a completely independent assessment, free of political influence when the final report is issued. We've seen this governor remove citizens from advisory boards, like the Port Authority, when he wanted to make some big changes and didn't like the way they were. We've seen employees removed, like the Department of Conservation and Recreation, when their jobs, when doing their jobs was contrary to the actions the governor wanted to take place. Frankly, when the state's hard pressed for funds for even basic services, for the governor to come up with $1 million, not to mention all your staff time, really raises questions for me as to whether or not we're going to see in the end a report that the facts will really reflect. And that's not meant as a criticism of you, it's just a concern about the political process here. Basically, the question I have, the concern I have, is whether whether you'll be able to do your job and keep your job. And I hope that will be the case. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Good evening. Thank you once again for allowing us to speak. I'm Susan Furry. I grew up in the shadow of Coles Hill, and all my family and brothers live there and operate a dairy farm. I'm sure you're tired of seeing our faces around all the time, but this is a great concern to us. You know that we're sitting right there on that needle that will go one way or the other. Our family will not be able to maintain its dairy operation if the mining goes through. This is a fact of life. When my brother visited Canada and asked about where the farming was, he went, "Farming? There is no farming near uranium mines." So it is very disappointing to me that the socioeconomic study is being pulled out to the very end. It is getting the least amount of attention and energy on your part. And quite frankly, I feel like that's the more important part. We can glean some of the regulations from other places, but we want to look at this site, this economic, socio event. You know, it's unique. You know, when the National Academy of Science came, they said that, you know, we're not comparing apples and oranges here. We're not comparing apples to each other. Canada is very different from Virginia. France is very different from Virginia. So we beg you to please look at Virginia and look at this situation that you have before you. Just another thought, when my brother visited San Antonio mine on his own, took his vacation time, the property values were 11%. That's a big hit.
We had a good Thanksgiving. And in Georgia turkeys that were probably raised in Virginia and fed with good water from Virginia or either North Carolina. All our vegetables that you probably eat come from Virginia and North Carolina. We need our water to supply our beef, our vegetables, our poultry, and our piggies. If we ruin this, we have lost it all. I have heard energy out of my ears. I am sick of it. If you do not have food and water, you do not need lights. Back to the National Academy's presentation when they went to the Uranium Subcommittee, they plainly stated, Chairman Paul Locke, that if Virginia was going to pursue this and look at this issue, they needed world-renowned experts, excuse me, are y'all there? Are you world-renowned experts with uranium mining? And you're going to make a decision. And I know you have to, don't take this wrong, I'm not trying to insult y'all, I know you work for the Department of Virginia. You have to feed your family, but don't try to ruin mine to feed yours. Thank you much.
On behalf of the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League and its members in Virginia and nearby states, I submit this written statement before the record. The environmental and public health impacts of uranium mining and milling are life-threatening and long-lasting. They include massive amounts of radioactivity and toxic rock, sand, and tailings, surface and groundwater contamination with radioactive and toxic pollutants, and airborne releases of conventional and toxic radioactive pollution. The international studies indicate that the incidence of lung cancer in uranium mine workers is 2 to 5 times higher than the general population. The population which causes this negative impact also affects those who live near uranium mining and milling operations. Pollution is transported via air, soil, and water, and indirectly via the food chain. Contamination of water supplies near uranium mines and processing plants has been documented in Colorado, Texas, Australia, and many other sites. We don't need it in Virginia. During the last few decades, New Mexico has capitalized on its natural and cultural assets and economic resources, not subject to the boom and bust cycles, which left behind ghost towns and hundreds of millions of radioactive waste. Overall, our recommendation is that Virginia should keep uranium mining ban in place The half-life of uranium is millions of years. The band has not decayed appreciably in 3 decades and should be considered to have a similar expiration date. Thank you.
My name is Hunter Austin. I live in Pennsylvania County, Hurt, Virginia. I have a 20-acre organic farm, which is 8 miles from the proposed north hole of the Coles Hill proposed uranium mine. Tonight, while we've been listening to the presentation, and thank you all very much for your work in this, I noticed a lot of emphasis on worker health. I noticed not one mention of public health. I don't understand why that is. We're the public. All your workers are public. Public health should be a main concern. Why are we considering adopting a conceptual regulation framework for an illegal industry? What is the driving force behind your decision to try to force this unwanted beast into our lives and down our throats? I'd much rather be fishing than here tonight talking to you, although this is fun. The risks you have described dealing with as your job do not exist now. They will only exist if the ban is lifted. The Department of Health, your responsibility is the public health. Your responsibility is not a private industrial profit. What good are regulations if in fact nobody follows them? Al Green was here in Chatham giving he's a mining and wastewater experienced engineer. He was with us in Chatham, and his quote was that the mining companies should follow best available technologies, but that they never do. This is a man who's been in this industry for years.
Katie Preston, I'm the Director of Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. We are a statewide organization that represents people of various faith traditions throughout the Commonwealth. Tonight I will speak for my own personal faith tradition, which is the Presbyterian tradition. I also have a bachelor's degree in physics and my master's of divinity, and I'm in process to be ordained in the Presbyterian Church. Philip, I thank you for reminding us about Thanksgiving. I gave thanks last week for the opportunity to not think about this issue, but I know that many of us don't have that luxury. And while I was at home, I had the opportunity to hear a sermon that was on gluttony and focused on the idea of gluttony as an environmental concern, of our overuse of our overuse as stewards of our resources. And as a future Presbyterian minister, I very much appreciated my senior pastor's call from the pulpit that climate change is real and it is our Christian responsibility to do something about it. And specifically in light of this issue, I call on the committee to consider the idea that climate change is real. And we have absolutely no idea what that's going to look like 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, to really try to gain and gauge probable maximum flood and precipitation probabilities in a changing climate. And I would just ask that as stewards of the resources that we have been given in Virginia, you seriously take this into consideration. Thank you.
My name is Marie Stella, and I'm a citizen, so that means I'm your employer and not Governor McDonald. I came here and I'm pretty disappointed in what I found. I thought we would have an in-depth discussion of science, and you just refer us to a website. There's no way we're going to find this on a website. The Roanoke River has just been declared one of the top 10 endangered rivers in the world. We have to worry about climate change. The World Health Organization just came out with an article talking about how dangerous the rising waters are to the aquifers and to the grounds that the aquifers are surrounded by. And you say there's no discussion of science except on a web page. The other problem is we're talking about, you keep talking about old technology and new technology. We don't know what the new technology is, but I'm assuming you're talking about the new technology is Virginia technology in Ontario, Virginia uranium. Well, if you look at the statistics there, Elizabeth Lake, which is the theater city to the people working there, the health rate, the disease rate is astronomical compared to the rest of Ontario. The radon is astronomical, and in hearings, the company actually said, well, people die eventually, so what does it matter if they die of cancer earlier? This is not the way we want to go. There's also an issue of security. No one has talked about security yet. We're making yellow cake. What are we doing about securing it, and what is it going to cost? The Finlanders just said it costs them $100 million to secure their plant. They're asking if their rivers are contaminated. We have to take some serious issues here and look at this more, and this is too short a time to discuss it. There's many other issues. The costs are astronomical to repair the damages here. Thank you.
With the Virginia Science and Engineers for Energy and Environment. Thanks to the committee for the great job you've done over this past year. A lot of material, good science, in disparate locations, and the governor was smart to put you in charge of getting all the data so everybody could at least look at what you have to consider to remove the ban. Not the license, but to remove the ban. You made a huge contribution. We've got to separate fact and science from fiction and hype. That's your job. It's got to be clear in your report so that we can pull it apart. Because every time I read a new article in some newspaper, I say, where the hell did they get that information? That's your job. Let's talk about what is. Virginia is a nuclear state. We have nuclear power plants, nuclear navy, nuclear medicine. We can't do without it, period. Now let's talk about some other numbers. Zero. The impact of Coles Hill on water supply in Norfolk, Virginia Beach is zero. The water utility people have said that out loud. Virginia pilot in July of this year said, oh, by the way, we currently monitor and remove contaminants like the stuff you're talking about. So no matter what happens at Coles Hill, there's no issue. Ask them, they said on the record, they have a study, I read the study, the first one, I read the most recent study, they all say the same thing. So we've got to take account for the capability of the water utility facilities to remove contaminants. That's a key issue that the public doesn't understand. Everybody gets it wrong. I heard it all night in every comment. So make sure that we hear that. The study has to identify what the utilities can tell you about how they can handle contamination. Thank you, and please help us separate fact from fiction.
I stopped at the bank in downtown Chatham this morning, and I looked next door at the house where my great-grandmother used to live. There was a new yard sign that said, "Stop whining, start mining." Bright green with yellow writing. I've not heard whining this evening. You may know that the Danville, Pennsylvania County Chamber of Commerce is in the process of deciding whether to take a position on uranium issue and so what. And they have followed a remarkably careful and confidential process because of the genuine and serious concern about for individual businesses to take a position. They're concerned with either ramifications from either side. It makes me wonder about a socioeconomic survey with a phone call with someone asking businesses in the southern central Virginia region about this issue. At the October meeting, I asked that in addition to the meeting of the uranium subcommittee, that you meet in Chatham to allow for full interactive public participation with people regarding your report. I don't think that's possible within the confines of a uranium study group meeting. Follow-up questions are important, and I would have touched on some as examples had there been time.
Madison, and I support keeping the ban on uranium mining in Virginia. The primary concern is for the health and safety of humans and all living creatures. In the event of an accident, the radioactive contaminants would reach the soil, the groundwater, and the drinking water supply. One person earlier in their comments tonight mentioned that nuclear power is the only source of energy with no emissions. Well, there is solar power, there's wind power, which have no emissions and also no dire consequences. We need to keep the ban and pursue wind power, solar power, as well as efficiency and conservation to meet our energy needs. Thank you.
Student at George Mason University, but I was born and raised in Hart, Virginia, in Pennsylvania County. As a student, considering where I want to relocate after graduation, I do not find an area impacted by uranium mining or the potential risks that go along with uranium mining appealing. Also, I come from a family with a history of real estate, and knowing new families and new businesses will not want to come to Virginia if they have to consider the many risks uranium mining poses. These realities that come with lifting the ban will surely cause an economic crisis in the state of Virginia.
And about uranium, if it's mined, once it's mined, it's gone with most of the jobs. To kick the can into the other end zone, the last people with mineable uranium will be able to set any conditions they want and charge us the highest price ever. And Virginia has always played a long game, so think about that. Now about earthquakes, terrorism, etc. I don't know. Is there enough money? On soft soil, something crazy like concrete and steel nuclear waste casks would ride out anything that Frank Lloyd Wright's hotel rode out at Wake Flat, Tokyo. That's too expensive. I wonder if we have enough money to get tourists to pay $100 a night. I know the casks won't. But no safe dose? Not even a banana equivalent dose? That's a real thing. I'll keep eating bananas. They're safer than rice now. Consumer Report says I have to cut back. Darn, I love rice. And I still wonder, coal or uranium? And I'm probably not going to get anybody's t-shirt.
Whereas Chris Dorsey had to leave to do a radio interview, I'm not going to actually speak for him exactly, but I'd like to tell you some things that I've learned. I have not had cable TV in years because I found it to give me falsehoods all the time. Wolf Media Blitzer has lied time and time again. I was taking care of my mother on Medical Family Leave Act and was watching current TV and free speech TV on DirecTV. I didn't know they existed. I watched so many programs on uranium mining, the dangers on the environment, the public, the people in a whole block. There was one block where 11 people died of cancer out of 15 people that were being downstreamed from the waste products, from what's going on. So I wanted to come up and speak to you because I just finished a book called The Military Industrial Complex at 50, MIC at 50. It was edited by David Swanson. There was a conference in Charlottesville earlier this year. He edited all the presentations, and there is no more compelling one piece of literature that shows how our never-ending wars and our environment are intertwined. And if we don't all come together, environmentalists, anti-war activists, all of us have to come together. We're on the precipice. If we do not stop this now, there is no going back. and our grandchildren will be saying to us, if we're alive, what the hell were you thinking? Please, please, look at that book. MIC at 50, davidswanson.org. Thank you.
Again, for being here. I'm a little worn out, and I'm not the one that's having to field all the questions and of course, before even listening to the comments. But thank you, you're doing a fantastic job. On my way in here, I wasn't inventorying the parking lot, but I noticed that I saw bumper stickers that were anti-coal, bumper stickers that were anti-nuclear, bumper stickers that were supporting groups that oppose natural gas, bumper stickers supporting groups that oppose hydro. And as I walked in, I was thinking, if we followed these agendas, these recommendations, we'd be sitting here in the dark right now, and it would be cold. It's easy to pack a room with people who are very adamant about a certain issue, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they represent the feelings, the sentiment of the people as a whole. There are 200,000 people in Richmond. We have about 200 people here. What we do know for the sentiment of the nation is we just had a long presidential campaign, and it seemed that in the debate, the two candidates were talking about who was more supportive of energy production. They were both talking about the need to produce more domestically and that we're importing too much. We import 90% of our uranium from other nations. Those folks that are arguing that show up to protest coal and natural gas and hydro and nuclear, they even protest wind power, they're protesting in Western Virginia, they protest solar power in Southern California. Those are the folks that don't represent the mainstream. We have to have energy, and for the assertions that somehow energy production is so bad, the argument is, what we have to ask ourselves, is there anything specific about Coles Hill that is not only unique, but is problematic to the point that we can't address it? We produce uranium safely in Canada, Australia, Russia, even Kazakhstan. They're all different places. Uranium is produced safely there. What is so different? A month ago in Chatham, I was the second person to speak, and I asked people, if you're going to oppose it, please tell me what is the difference. Tell us why this is so much more dangerous than elsewhere. And no one's really addressed that. They point out there's some differences. They don't talk about why it's important. So I ask you to please support what most people in America do, and that is more energy production. This is what we all do.
Thank you, Franz, for your work. My name is Mike Pucci. I'm the chairman of the North Carolina Coalition Against Uranium Mining, and I serve on the board of the Roanoke River Basin. Folks, for the first time in recent history, in North Carolina, we found an issue that Republicans, Democrats, and half-level independents can agree on. We all oppose uranium mining in the Roanoke River Basin. Counties, county governments, municipalities, chambers of commerce, property owners, all the property owners around the lake region all the way to the sound have voiced and passed resolutions to that effect. Now, primacy has been established in the Roanoke River watershed for the use of the resource for drinking water, recreation, agriculture, and real estate development. Uranium mining in a hurricane zone has never been done. There are no best practices to suggest that an open containment cell of 80 acres in size could withstand a hurricane. Nowhere in the world is uranium mined in a hurricane zone in proximity to an active fault line that has produced 3 earthquakes in the last 18 months. Comparison to the Chatham site, to Saskatchewan, where I've just returned from a deer hunt, where there's more deer than people, and no active community within 100 miles of that site, is laughable if it weren't so serious an issue and a threat to our drinking water. Nowhere in your draft regulations to date have you accounted for or dealt with the threat of a disaster and its impacts downstream to North Carolina all the way to the coast. And how could you when there's nothing much that you can do? If Virginia accepts responsibility as a regulator on this activity in our watershed, then the taxpayers of Virginia are officially on the hook for the damages this industry may inflict. You cannot escape your responsibility.
The history of the Uranium Working Group was tragically flawed when it was started to try to take a bigger bite out of this puzzle than anyone could manage to achieve. We don't have any knowledge base or database whatsoever, however simplistically you want to define it, as to baseline natural radiation and radioactivity in private wells, drinking wells, wells that are used for dairy farmers. We don't have that because 30 years ago, when I asked you to put a uranium mining ban in place and you obliged, you promised that before it would be lifted, there would be an opportunity for all that work to be done. Well, exactly 0% has been done in the last 30 years. And it's going to take about another 30 years to do a proper epidemiological baseline survey to have any random knowledge of what happened when Morocco collided with Virginia and created the Atlas Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains 250 to 350 million years ago. We just simply don't know. As it stands now, I have given the Department of Health evidence that there's a well in a certain location on a map that I can provide you and can provide the Congress with in Hanover County, less than 14 miles from where we stand, that has the third highest polonium-210 level of any well ever measured in the United States. That was measured in 1999. Has anyone bothered to tell the 440 people that drink that well that they are a private well and therefore they're given no consideration about the safety of their well water by the state of Virginia? Has anyone experienced the danger they're up against from Morocco colliding with Virginia 250 million years ago? Much less an intentional infliction of more of this cancer on people and their environment for no good economic reason, because we now know how to take nickel and water and hydrogen and make endless amounts of fusion energy. Uranium will soon be worth zero. Better think again, folks. You can open a huge wound and a cavity you can't fill. You get no economic benefit.
Coming to these meetings, you guys are doing a wonderful job. I really think our governor is filling the blanks, because we have the ban, we should keep the ban. I feel very strongly about that. And as someone pointed out earlier, we've got an illegal industry. It's banned. So why in heaven's name are we wasting our time and our money with all of this? Because our governor wants to. Well, you know, do one of these studies for moonshine and marijuana. Remember, somebody just mentioned that today. I really, really dislike the way our governor and those people who want you to spend all this time are wasting both my time and my money. I pay taxes. That's what funds all of this time that you are spending. And someone asked me, it's millions of dollars. Your time, the costs, the things you're not getting done, that's kind of annoying. Plus, you're wasting my time, which means a lot to me. I'm 70, I don't think I have that much left. And I am sitting here going to these meetings because, I'm sorry, I will show up and keep showing up because I think this is such a dumb move. You're doing a good job, but I certainly would never, ever, ever vote for the governor who is causing us to waste this money and waste this time. Thank you.
My name is Christopher Maxwell. Something that has only been mentioned once, and I haven't found much discussion on this, which is the panelist furthest on the right here said that on this mine, just like any other mine, the ore will be exposed to oxidizing conditions, as in oxygen, as in our air. Well, if I take a lump of rock the size of my fist, that's maybe half a square foot of exposed surface area. If I break it into 1,000 pieces, I've exposed maybe 100 square feet of surface area to the atmosphere, which means that the radon trapped in that rock now has that much easier time getting out. Well, radon is a noble gas, which means that it doesn't interact chemically with anything else, which means you can't filter it. So that means you're going to have much more radon gas coming out of this mine. It lasts for about 3 days, give or take, when it actually started at life. And so within about 3 days, it's going to just drift downwind and turn into polonium. Polonium is used to assassinate people. Yeah. So that means that we are literally going to, I know this sounds extreme, but look it up or tell me how this is not going to happen. That over the next several thousand years, we're going to sterilize everything that's 3 days downwind from this site with a film of polonium. And I see you smirking, but if you have children, how are you going to explain that to them, the sterilization of our state? And so if they are going to sterilize my state and they get this, I'm going to sue for a takings of my property that ahead of time saying, my property within my lifetime, or at least my children's lifetime, will be worthless. And so if you want to buy the entire state of Virginia at retail prices, then go ahead. But if not, expect a lot of lawsuits and controversy, since we don't want to have our lives and land sterilized. Thank you.